Hello, everyone. It is March 31st, 2022, and this is the weekly Backdrop Developer meeting. We get together every week to talk about the priorities and objectives for Backdrop Core and beyond, but with a focus on development related issues. Before we get started, we'll do some introductions of everyone present in the meeting. My name is Nate Lampton. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet. I'm core committer for Backdrop, and I am calling from Oakland, California. Let's go to Robert and then Martin.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet, and I'm in Altadena, California.
Thanks, Robert. Martin and then Jen.
I'm Martin Price, Yorkshire Pudding on the internet, and I'm in Northeast England, United Kingdom.
Thanks, Martin. Jen and then Justin.
I'm Jen Lampton, joining from Oakland, California.
All right, Justin, and then finally Peter.
Justin Christofferson, joining from Denver, Colorado.
Thank you. Peter, if you're available.
Peter, BW Panda online. I'm in Australia and also core committer.
All right, thanks, Peter. All right, that's everybody who is in attendance for today. Before we get into general discussion, we do contrib updates. Jen, do you have the update for this week?
Yep, there's just one contrib module this week, and it is called Entity Connect. I don't know what that module does, but it looks exciting.
Let's see, it extends the autocomplete fields of entity reference and reference fields to add new content and edit content buttons. So kind of like a super autocomplete, sounds like. Very cool. That'll tie into some of our discussion today related to entity references. For this week, we have had a number of things that were mentioned during the weekly forum posts. We have a forum post under under forum.backdropcms.org that solicits topics for this meeting, and there were a number of posts this week on things that people would like updates on. So we'll go through the list of all of those items. The first one that we have was raised by Olaf Zerbinski, which we don't have. He's not here in the meeting, but he's looking for an update on the organic groups porting initiative. Are we still making progress? Where is help the most needed? I am not well equipped to answer that question, and I'm curious if anyone else within this meeting has any information about the porting over organic groups.
I don't. I'm using it on one of my projects, and it seems to be working for everything that I needed to do, but organic groups is a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of areas where it still needs work. I just don't know what those
are. Let's see. Looks like Laren had been doing some work on it. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I think it was slightly different. I think it was Tim who was asking what's happening, and it was Olaf providing a noting on what he's been doing in case he can't get there. So I think Olaf's been doing quite a bit, but so that's his update.
So I'm afraid that we're not well equipped to answer that question with the people that are present. It does look like there's a number of items simply like in the issue queue itself for OG in the contrib module issue queue. That looks like there's just a number of things that are quite obvious that need to be addressed yet. Doesn't look like many, let's see, or any of them actually have pull requests. There's no open pull requests at all for the OG module. So it looks like, to me, the most obvious thing here is that this is lacking in development effort, that there's just a number of things that can be addressed through pure coding effort by checking out the issue queue and tackling some of these issues that are open here. But I don't have any other information on progress here. It does look like Laren is our primary committer for organic groups, and Laren is highly active even right now. So I think that if a developer were to start contributing, they would find a highly active maintainer to help facilitate the changes to the module. Well, barring any other news that we have about organic groups, I think we'll move on to the next question, which is add code formatting automation, issue 5568, that BW Panda, Peter Anderson, who's here in this meeting, raised. And yeah, Peter, why don't you just fill us in on this, and then we can chat about it.
Okay, so this came about with an existing issue, don't have the number in front of me, it's probably linked in that one maybe, where we wanted to add style lint, like plugin library thing to fix up some styling issues in CSS on pull requests.
Yeah, 5245 is that issue number.
So that's an older one that I was looking into, and I've just gone through my old issues trying to update them a bit. So I was looking at that one, but in the last 12 months since I last did a pull request for that, that library plugin thing has changed the way it works, in that it doesn't change the look of your code. It only changes the functionality. Like if you're missing like a parentheses in CSS, that's obviously a bug, so it'll fix that, but it won't change like white space or line length sort of issues, because that's purely just stylistic stuff. And they said there's better libraries out there for that sort of thing. So that's what prompted this issue, which was to use a separate actually like GitHub action type thing for just styling code nicely in pull requests. And I've listed a few of the benefits there, some of which are like not having reviews that are purely just like, oh, can you add a space here or fix this line length here, and just those little nitty picky sort of things that new contributors might get put off by. So this can all be automated. It's just a matter of finding and choosing a sort of formatter that we want to use.
I'm curious what this one you suggested, prettier. Where are its integration points? Like, at which point will it raise the questions about, your formatting being incorrect, and what will it do to fix them?
So it, so I believe you can set up with the GitHub action to just run on pull requests, and I think there's like a flag which may be default, which will just fix everything, as opposed to like printing out. I think you can possibly, I haven't played with it too much, but you can possibly also print out a list of what it wants to change, but otherwise it'll just change things automatically. It's got its own internal style guide type system that it'll just, it basically like reformats all the code according to its style guide. And initially that sounded to me like a bad thing, because we've got our own code standards. Like, this is specific for CSS, but obviously you can do the same for other languages. We've got our own code standard for CSS, but on the other hand, their argument for having their own code styling was that developers don't need to argue over which code styling format's better, that some do it this way, some do it that way. It means anyone can write a pull request in whatever style they want, and everything's then just reformatted automatically to be consistent. So there's pros and cons to it, being an opinionated code formatter, but it'll just do it for you. And I'm not sure, I think Robert asked in the issue whether it did a pull request or it just did it automatically. I'm not sure, I haven't played with it, but and if not this one, there's probably other ones that do similar things. I was just looking at one before that it'll actually flag an error, like in the tests that run, like GitHub actions, it'll say have an error if there's problems, and then it'll create its own pull request against yours that you can just click on merge to update its changes, sort of thing. So there's all different ways that you can do it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing that I'm seeing right now is that Prettier is primarily JavaScript based, installed through npm, which could have some benefits because the approach that we've been pursuing so far has been only through PHP CS, which is formatting for PHP code exclusively and doesn't deal with CSS and JavaScript, which we also have a fair amount of in Backdrop. But at the same time, like I'm seeing like Prettier, it does have some support for PHP, although it's fairly limited. It looks like it would basically be, limited to really simple code style configuration, things like spaces versus tabs, semicolons. It looks like it's generally like not totally comprehensive for PHP. I poked around a little bit and saw that in fact there is a PHP CS extension for Prettier that would make it so that Prettier will parse PHP CS rules and then apply them as running as part of Prettier, which I thought was pretty funny. That it basically would just I think maybe you might do that if you wanted one linter for your entire code base and you wanted it to integrate into a more comprehensive set of rules that come from PHP CS. But I don't know. Looking at this initially, it just looks like it's like not a whole lot different in concept from like PHP CS and where it gets run. It's just a matter of like where its focus is and how granular the configuration is, I think.
So this came about, so as the other issue that you mentioned was for linting style sheets specifically. So style lint is the plugin there that we were using. And this came about because they said, yeah, we're no longer doing the stylistic changes. We're just doing like bug fixing for you. If you want to use stylistic changes and have the code be pretty, then use something like Prettier. And that's how I found this one. So it's primarily JavaScript, but it does other languages like PHP, but I was looking at it in this issue specifically for CSS. But obviously, yeah, you can look at it for other languages too. But initially I was just thinking just for our CSS files, just to style them, because there was discussions in the previous issue about whether we use short hex formats for colors or long hex formats, and we decided on that. Whether you have like the opening parentheses on the same line or the new line, all those sort of little things that format the code differently. This will sort of automate all that for us for CSS files. Yes, it might do other ones, but I was looking purely at CSS files.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this really isn't okay. The issue that you initially referenced was 2785, which was CSS coding standards, as opposed to 5245, which was the PHP CS. So you're not really looking at this. You're not suggesting that we replace what we've been pursuing in 5254, the PHP CS work. Do you think that that's parallel, or this is a replacement for that?
No, yeah, I think that any PHP stuff will be on its own, and this at the moment is just for, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like I was looking at it initially coming from the other issue talking about CSS coding standards, but as you've said, this does different languages. So we could initially implement something like this specifically for CSS files, and then over time, if we wanted to add other file extensions that it can format as well. But yeah, this issue was initially about as an extension of 2785, the CSS one.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, we should first of all clarify the title of this issue to narrow the scope of it a little bit, to say that it's specifically for CSS and maybe JavaScript, because it looks like it would be effective for that purpose. To separate it out from PHP CS, because I think that our holdup on PHP CS is like, where do we put the coding standards, which is kind of a silly problem. I think we've actually answered that question. It's just that we haven't started it yet. But once we have the PHP CS linting rules set up, then we need to add the GitHub Actions integration to actually do the linting and then apply the changes, like however we would do that. And that question is still unanswered as to how the best way, like what is the best way to solve that problem of, like if a pull request is made, how does the comment get added to the pull request suggesting the changes? And I'm sure that there has to be lots of existing solutions to solve that problem. And one thing that would be really beneficial in this issue, because the scope of CSS styling, like linting and style checking, is much smaller than that of PHP. CSS is just a much simpler syntax, and there's just a lot. Well, there's also just less CSS in our code base than there is PHP. So that seems really promising. That potentially what we could do here, Peter, is we could start with, if you wanted to continue investigating this further, it would be very beneficial to the other issue, the PHP linting issue, if we could figure out that process of how does the GitHub action run, how does it make suggestions to the pull request, things like that. Because what I think I'm saying with Prettier is that it primarily, like, it's a command line tool that runs the linting, and yes, it can auto fix for you. PHPCS can auto fix for you as well. It also has a flag for that. But they're still just command line tools. Some automation needs to be done or written to make it so that it actually interacts with pull requests and actually provides the feedback on GitHub. And then people need to either approve the changes or have them made automatically somehow. And how the linter or the prettier factors into our CI process is kind of like, we haven't really figured that out yet. So this would be super awesome if you wanted to pursue this. Then we could use whatever approach you use for augmenting pull requests in the PHPCS issue as well. They could actually be really beneficial and complementary to each other rather than like completely different alternatives.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the way that they integrate with GitHub is just going to be down to with the specific tool that we use and what their GitHub action integration is like. From what I understand with Prettier, it is, because it's opinionated, it says this is how all the code is going to be formatted, regardless of, there's really no options you can use to change how the formatting happens. So because of that, I don't think they're going to have much in the way of, here's what we recommend you change, and then you say yes or no. I mean, why would you say no? That means your code is going to be all inconsistent between pull requests. So I think in their opinion, all the code is going to be formatted like this, therefore it happens automatically. But other ones, yeah, like PHPCS or the other issue where I've done the style linting for CSS, that will have options for allowing you to see the changes before allowing them, or sometimes you have to make them manually because it can't fix everything automatically. So
yeah, well, I'm still, the question of like how it actually integrates into the pull request, like if they have a marketplace app for GitHub that does it automatically, or if you need to write a GitHub action that does all of the work manually, and we need to set up secret keys to make it so that it has write access to the repository and those sorts of things. Yeah. That's where my question is around like that portion of things.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't considered writing my own one because I was hoping there was one existing that I could just plug in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is that there has to be existing marketplace applications or existing scripting that takes the output of a linter, probably regardless of the linter itself, and then makes the suggestions to your pull request.
Pull request.
Yeah. And it would be nice if there was one that could use multiple different tools, that we could use Prettier for CSS and we could use PHPCS for PHP and use the same tool to make the suggestions to the pull requests or the automatic commits or whatever. But I kind of see where you're saying, where the PHP ones might be optional, like they could be suggestions, but the CSS ones might be required. I don't know. There's probably some fuzziness there where there's some things that are obviously wrong, like tabs versus spaces, that we should always be enforcing, line endings to make sure that we're using, the Linux line endings, not the Mac OS or Linux or Windows ones. Those sorts of things we know for sure. But there are some things that probably are going to be a little opinionated with PHP. But our initial approach to the PHP one is that we're starting from scratch on the PHP rules. And so starting with the PHP rules we're going to do the ones that are most obvious and the ones that need to be enforced 100% of the time anyway. So starting out, we actually could also make the same assumption that all of the suggestions need to be applied all the time. Well, anyway, yeah, does anyone else have thoughts or opinions? Okay, let's move on to the next item then. Martin, you raised the question of reference or entity reference in core. Could you recap what kind of information you're looking for? Oh, you're muted.
I was looking to see what kind of discussion there'd been. There's issue 1301, and there did seem to be a bit of back and forward as to which way it was going, whether it was reference module or entity reference. And the last comment from Tim just 16 days ago was discussion seems to have swung in the direction of entity reference, but there's other things that entity reference seems to have more functionality. That's been my experience as well. I think what it is probably wanting to get a bit of direction, because when making kind of strategic decisions for a website that uses this, you kind of don't want to go down a rabbit hole that then you find out actually we're not really using this anymore, we're using the other one. So I think that's a kind of clarity it'd be good to get, but I don't know that we can get that here, but it'd be good just to move it on and see if we can get somewhere with this.
Yeah, totally. Jen, you're unmuted. Do you have something that you want to?
No, sorry.
Okay, I thought you were preparing to say something. Okay, I'll give you my state of where I think that this is. So yeah, I think Tim's comment was probably coming out of one of these weekly meetings that we discussed, like what the best options are right now. And like Tim said, the public opinion has generally shifted from writing an all new module, which is reference module in contrib. I say all new, but originally written for backdrop with the purpose of putting it in core, starting from simple and then working upwards. That's reference module as it exists in contrib today. But there is entity reference, which is a port of the Drupal entity reference module. And that is a full port of the Drupal module and all of its capabilities, and also support for all of the other contrib modules that depend on entity reference. So what has ended up happening is that the kind of built from scratch one hasn't actually turned out to be very popular because it doesn't have all of the functionality of an entity reference. And also all of the existing contrib modules that exist only work with entity, or they don't only work with entity reference, but entity reference is the most widely supported one as well. And also, it's the most installed by like a substantial margin at this point. Go ahead,
and I think one of the reasons we didn't originally want to put entity reference in core was because it depended on entity API, which wasn't fully in core, and then later depended on entity plus. And that's been fixed recently. I think Herb went through and removed all of the dependency on the other contrib module. And so now we have the ability to put entity reference in core without the dependencies we were worried about before. So I think the landscape has changed a lot on this. Also the fact that when we first started, we didn't have anyone working on entity reference and we only had people working on reference, and now it seems to be the other way around. I don't know that we have a answer for this question, but my thought would be like wherever the activity is, that's what we should be supporting. So rather than trying to push in a direction we're not moving in naturally. We should just say, where's the backdrop community going? Everybody seems to be using entity reference. Let's put that in core. I don't know if anyone has other thoughts on that, but
Yeah, I'll also give some other status updates that one of our other blockers that we had, the only blocker we had remaining for putting any kind of universal entity reference module, universal reference module in core, was a centralized view method on all kinds of entities. So, node arrow view, comment arrow view, and a function called entity view that would just render an entity regardless of what type it was. That was added in the last release in 121. So we no longer have any blockers in core that prevent adding a central reference module to core itself, like as a new module. So yeah, it's a little bit funny because we haven't officially made the decision now to use entity reference, but that's where the momentum is. And potentially, I think the next step we should do is possibly formalize that, because I think it would help. It would help a lot in terms of clarity and confusion, but it also, I think, might shift the effort from like prep work to like implementation work. Like, let's make a pull request that puts entity reference into core, and what does the update hook look like that needs to deal with it. And we have lots of examples of moving contrib modules into core. And from what I've seen in the contrib module queue, like I went through and code reviewed it, it's clean. It's like tidy. It's really pretty compact. It's written in the same way as other backdrop core modules. It is a more complex one, kind of like layouts, because it has its own plugin system that has certain behaviors and classes and things like that. But that doesn't make it dissimilar from views or layout. So I don't know. It's really like in a good place as a contrib module, and the likely way that we'll move it into core is a full-on take the contrib module, put it in the modules directory, and that'll be it. Because we really want to be able to continue to support the contrib modules that have grown up around entity reference module, and make it so that it's as smooth a transition as possible. So that's the likely.
Another thing too, like I have built a handful of sites using reference module. I would imagine there will be an upgrade path, and that upgrade path might not exist, the day that entity reference goes into core. But I would imagine that there will be a way that you can take your sites with reference module and convert them to entity reference module. So I don't think there's necessarily like, if you did it wrong, there isn't going to be a way out. So I know if you're trying to make a decision today as to which module you use, hopefully that'll give you a little more confidence.
Yeah, there's an issue in entity reference on migrate path from reference. So it's where Herb's mentioned there's a module called entity reference migration that in theory could be ported. But yeah, I'm looking at doing a site that it's been has been built with references, but some of the things aren't working, and I think it would be better with entity references.
I think the schema definition between reference and entity reference is almost exactly the same. So I'm not even really sure we need the migrate functionality. I think we just need the ability to identify a field that was previously as reference and then change the field configuration so that it knows that it's an entity reference field.
Right. Okay.
I don't think there's really going to be any change in the database structure.
So it could be worth just experimenting, just doing a change in the config file,
and seeing
importing it back in, see what happens. Yeah, I'll give that a go.
Test site, but yeah, I think that could be less work than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the contrib module called in 777 that provided the entity Entity
Entity.
metadata wrappers. What was it?
Entity
Oh, it was
API.
just called entity.
Entity. Yeah.
What's the entity API?
The name was Entity API. The machine name was just Entity.
Okay. I'm just posting a comment here.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Next up, we have an issue with Tugboat, our provider that provides sandboxes on core pull requests. Peter, are you around and able to speak to this right now?
Yep, should be able to. So yeah, we use Tugboat currently for a whole bunch of things, but specifically core pull requests. And we are currently, as far as I believe, getting a free subscription for the Plus plan, which gives us about 40 gigabytes of storage, and we're constantly hitting that more and more so. It used to be that we would have like 9 months of pull requests and then we'd start hitting the 40 gigabyte limit, but then I'd delete the older ones and new pull requests are being created. Now we've got like 2 or 3 months worth of pull requests that are still hitting that 40 gigabyte limit. So it's a good problem to have because it means we're getting lots of pull requests and lots of activity in the issue queue. But yeah, it's just constantly becoming more of an issue with our quota. So there is a higher plan that gives like 2 terabytes of storage or more, but it's like $500 a month. I had a small thought the other day. I was like, oh, I wonder if I can just put some money personally towards this just to stop it being a problem, until I found out what the actual price was. I was like, no, I can't do that, sorry. So I see 4 solutions. One, which is our fallback, is obviously just do what we've been doing, and that's to continue monitoring it and just deleting the old pull requests once we start hitting that limit. But that's obviously not a good long-term solution, but that's what we've been doing so far. Another option would just be to ask Tugboat if they'd consider upgrading our plan for free, as they've done so far. Another option is to pay for it ourselves. I don't know what sort of funds Backdrop has available and if that's an option, but that would be, instead, if we didn't want to just keep asking for free stuff all the time. Or look around for another provider, which I'm not sure if there would be any that would give us better storage for free or whatever, but that's the options I thought of. And yeah, I think we need to do something about it because, as I said, it's a problem that we're probably going to have more and more in future.
Yeah, all good options. Thanks for laying them out. Yeah, I think continuing to use it as is. First of all, I think that's really beneficial that we have started cleaning up old previews, because I feel like we're using Tugboat responsibly. Like the cap has made it so that we basically have to work within limited resources or be responsible with the space that we have. So that's been good that we've had this experience just to use Tugboat the most efficiently as possible, considering they're giving us their services for free. But at this point, it seems clear, like, the next step that we should do is ask them, can we get a better plan? The problem that I know we've had from previous conversations is that they're already giving us the highest tier plan they have that is still using shared resources. And so the reason why there's just such a big bump in pricing is because that means that you're getting dedicated infrastructure at the next tier, which means an additional hosting and cost burden for Tugboat to provide that next tier. However, that doesn't mean that they won't provide it. I think that they were a little bit hesitant previously because they were like, I don't know, that makes it so that it's not just free. It's like it actually has some costs associated. But considering we're at the end of the capabilities of the tier that we're on, and we've tried other things to work around it, I think that we have a pretty good case to take to Tugboat and say, we've done what we can, can within the free plan that you've given us, can we get upgraded? Kind of like we did our due diligence, to try to minimize things, and it wasn't enough. We just need more. So I think that that's the first thing that we should try. Since I work at Lullabot, who is affiliated with Tugboat, I'll go back and ask again. I think that possibly. Last time we asked, they were really open to it. But I think that Tugboat is running with minimal resources right now. So I think that it's kind of a burden for them to be doing things that aren't directly adding to their bottom line. We might need to do a little bit of increased visibility. I'm not quite sure what that means, but compensate Tugboat in some way through like additional thank yous or marketing or something.
Question: is it possible to run Tugboat on our own server? Because if we're worried about like dedicated resource costs, but we could get those for free from something like Linode, there might be a way that we could run Tugboat on infrastructure that wouldn't cost Lil about anything, and might not cost us anything too. I mean, obviously there's going to be a bunch of developer time to set something like that up, which I'm not sure we know how to do, but I'm just thinking about a way that we could sort of remove that burden from Wellabot if we might be able to get those resources for free.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. Tugboat is based on Linode, which there could be some possibility that like we could essentially provide the server and then Lullabot might maintain it or provide Docker images that we could then install on that Linode. But I don't know. I'll put that forward and see if that would work at all. But I don't know about that. It's a good idea though. The other thing that is kind of interesting is looking around for another provider. At the last Backdrop Live, we had the open source maintainer of Probo CI, which is also a Drupal-oriented continuous integration provider that specializes in sandboxes and per pull request sandboxes. And that is kind of an interesting option that Tugboat is actually proprietary. Like it's, you don't have access to the source code anywhere. Probo is open source, and you can self-host if you want. However, from what I saw during the presentations, it looked like it was a gnarly thing to set up. However, the lead developer of the open source implementation is highly keen on Backdrop. I mean, he came to Backdrop Live and he's working on a setup that he hopes to provide to open source projects such as ourselves that would make it a really great alternative possibly in the future.
That could be something that we could experiment with on our own projects, like for backdropcms.org or something, and try and figure out how we could get running on Probo. I mean, I don't know, something less critical than Backdrop Core to start with anyway. And it could be something that we could work with them on in terms of getting that running. And if we did need to figure out how to split like sandboxes versus pull requests, like demo sandboxes versus pull requests or whatever, I think that might be a way that we might be able to spread Backdrop's burden across multiple platforms too. And whether that's Probo on our own servers or Lullabot's donation of Tugboat servers or however it works out. I do like the idea of supporting another open source project also. So sounds nice.
Yeah, Martin, you have something to add?
Yeah, just to sort of build on Peter's options, whether it would be one option could be a hybrid where we say, well, we're struggling with 40 gigabytes. Maybe we don't need 4 terabytes, but could we have a bit more? And we'd be happy to put a little bit of money in to sort of to top it up, so something that could be affordable to us and just give us a bit more capacity rather than a huge leap up to the next step. And even if it's not a plan, they might be willing to consider that.
Yeah, I think I actually suggested that once before, but they literally just don't have anything in between the two tiers. And I think that I'm not sure why that is. Like, why can't they just have one that has slightly more size? I don't really know. I think that there's something about they have the shared services like scaling, and everybody is all equal in between there. And I think that they don't have the ability to say one particular shard or one particular account has a greater limit. For some reason, they're all equally distributed. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. It seemed, for some reason, it was more difficult than I would have assumed. Yeah. But it wasn't because they wanted compensation. It was literally like there was a technical problem. They couldn't make an exception for one particular account to have it be on the shared infrastructure, but have more space. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, all good options though. I think the immediate thing is I will go and ask for an increased account again and see kind of where they stand on things. My inside knowledge of the inner workings of Tugboat also lets me know that Tugboat has hired some new people recently, so they're a little less strained than they had been before. So I'm hoping that might give them some breathing room and more ability to acquiesce like requests like this. Okay, all right. Lastly, from the forum posts, we have a follow-up from a discussion that we were having last week or the week before about adding issue milestones to issues. And Jen, looks like there's been some documentation updates in the user guide. Do you want to bring that up? And
so I was having a hard time figuring out how to write this out in a way that I thought matched what we decided on last week. And so I just wanted to, after I wrote it out, I wanted confirmation that I got it right. So essentially what I do is I removed the hard requirement that a bug fix pull request had that a bug fix issue had a pull request in a near ready state. And I added that as an exception. A pull request if a bug fix has a pull request in a near ready state, then you can add the label even if nobody else agrees that it should, or you can add the milestone even if no one else agrees to have the milestone. But otherwise, issues don't have to have a pull request in a near ready state. They just have to have two people agree that they're important enough to go into the next bug fix release. This will change things significantly. I feel like the reason we added the pull request in the near ready state requirement was because we got way too many issues that were scheduled for the next bug fix that weren't getting any progress. And we're sort of going to shift back into that. We're going to have a lot of issues with no pull requests that people want to have worked on. So I just wanted to make sure that that was the direction we wanted to go with that.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the page now, and actually, why don't I share the screen so we all can look at it together. Here's the documentation page, which looks great. So adding milestones, bug fix releases. This is where the change is primarily, yes. Right, Jen?
Yeah.
And then there's minor release workflow as well. So yeah, I think we can see almost the whole.
So there used to be 4 requirements in the first section, and we didn't mention anything about critical bug fixes that didn't have pull requests, but we thought were urgent enough that they needed to be on our priority list for the next release. And so we essentially, rather than adding anything about critical issues, we just said if 2 people agree that this issue should be in the next milestone, it should be in the next milestone. And then removed the hard requirement that it has a pull request, and then added that as an exception that said if your issue has a pull request, it can be added into the milestone.
Yeah, I kind of I think this looks good. Like as far as the 1, 2, 3 or this 1, 2, 3 or this. I think that there's a little bit more consistency that could be brought, like tagged with the label. It should say which label it is, like the same wording, basically, like literally.
Yeah, I mean, we can update the documentation. I just want to make sure that I got the concept correct.
Oh, okay.
Like, Are we okay with adding a bunch of extra issues into every bug fix release is the real question. That won't have pull requests on them.
Wait, that won't have pull requests?
Right, because that's no longer a requirement. So now we're going to get a whole bunch of issues that don't have pull requests in them.
Oh, I see. Because this, like,
Right.
one person and then a second means that no pull request is needed.
Right.
Yeah,
That's okay.
that is what we discussed previously. Yeah.
Yeah, which we didn't specifically indicate that that would happen. We're just like, how do we get this one critical issue in there? And we're like, well, actually, we're going to be introducing like potentially hundreds of issues by doing this. So I just wanted to make sure that we're okay with that. Okay, so I'm okay with that. Then I'll keep updating the documentation. But I was just like, wait a minute, let's talk about it. Okay,
Yep.
that's great. We
Yeah,
can
so-
remove this from next week's agenda. Then I'll go.
Yeah. So,
Maybe be a stipulation as well, where often you see an issue where it's had like the milestone was passed, so it's been previous milestone was removed, the next milestone's been added, and that happens like 10, 20, 30 times in a row as just issues get pushed to the next one. Should there be something where it's like, if that happens more than X amount of times, then we just remove the milestone and go back to just the label until there's something more closer to being ready?
We had a rule like that originally, but it turns out you actually have to look at each issue in order to do that. And if you have hundreds of issues in the milestone, that's not something we do on release day. So we might put a little asterisk in there that's like, just so you know, this might happen, but I don't think that should be a hard and fast rule until we can figure out how to automate it.
yeah, I wonder if there should be. So this is adding milestones. Maybe we should have like a sub area in here about removing milestones. Under what circumstances removal is considered okay. Because we only have rules for adding and not really rules for removing. And I don't think we need to automate it or have impede our releases, but just as an individual, if somebody goes in and sees that something has been bumped 20 times, they should have rules to follow to say, can I remove this from the milestone?
That's a great idea.
Yeah, but this looks great. It basically means that like steps 1 through 3 here, the first set of criteria is pretty much the same for minors and for bug fixes. Minor releases need advocates, and bug fixes essentially do not. They just need agreement. But then the second option is basically if something is RTBC or really close, then it can be put into the minor release or into the bug fix release, right? So they're much more in alignment now. And that's what I was saying, Jen, that just terminology wise, you probably can copy and paste the exceptions for both of them and copy and paste the requirements to make them sound as close as possible with just the difference in the tags.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We only have 5 minutes remaining. That's the end of the topics that we had raised through the forum post. But I would like to call a little bit of attention to the next feature release, 1.22. Some progress has been made in that area or on that release this past week. One of which was this large collaboration, issue 2626. Which adds a new capability to the admin toolbar that, in addition to contextual links, if you wanted to disable contextual links or wanted to leave it on, the admin bar also now provides the ability to do things like edit the node, edit the layout, and edit the view, or edit any other on-page things through the admin bar, which is a pretty cool feature enhancement. That issue is 2626, and long list of contributors, BW Panda, Bug Folder, the two people present in this meeting. Thank you for doing the majority of the coding. Indigo Zella, Klonos, St. Paul Tim, Jen, Laren, Doc Wilmot, Olaf, Phil Sword, and Graham72. So quite the collaboration of people there. I'm happy to see that new feature added in. Also, this is one of my favorite things is when I am not in the commit list, nor did I do the commit itself. Like I'm just like, yeah, go team. So Laren did the final merge on that I think just last night, and it's just so awesome when all of that happens that everyone is working together to make things happen. Okay, and the next item that is related to 1.22 is the hidden path content type, the card content type in the standard profile, issue 4903. This continues to get really close. I think that we have generally agreed upon the implementation, the way that it comes out of the box, the new view that is set up, the configuration of the content type. Everything is the configuration of the new homepage layout. Everything seems to be approved to the point that we're now arguing about which images to include. So we're in a really good place here, where I mean, to our benefit, Wes Rubikaba, the original designer of the basis theme, came in and started making suggestions about the default images that could potentially be included. I'm not sure that it's been productive so far, but it's been really helpful to have Wes back, because we don't have very many designers, and Wes is one. So he's making some suggestions, and we're working out just within the. He doesn't have a full understanding of how it's built out, though, so some of his suggestions aren't necessarily the best ones. But I'm hoping that we can get this last little bit worked out. It's also possible that we might say, let's change the default images later if that's all that we're fighting about at this point. So, yeah, I'm really happy to see that coming to a close here, and I'm optimistic about that getting completed in the next couple of weeks. Speaking of the next couple of weeks, it is starting tomorrow, the month of April. Watch out for April Fool's jokes. But that means that it's the last month that we have before feature freeze for Backdrop 122, which will be usually May 1st, but that's always barring any holidays. May 1st lands on a Sunday this year, so that actually means May 1st will likely be the feature freeze day for 122. I think that's all I've got as far as the 122 update. We are at the top of the hour. Does anyone have any last comments or anything they'd like to add before we close? All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming to the meeting today. Great work as always in the issue queue. Martin, I hope that we get some progress on entity reference. I think that that's the safest choice at this point. And I'll make a request over to Tugboat to see if we can get our account upgraded again. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.